While Ohio lawmakers have been considering the state's budget, they have also been looking at Senate Bill 56, which would change the state rates on medical and adult use marijuana. It could also change the way tax revenue would be allocated and spent. Those who are opposed to it say it undermines the legislation that Ohioans originally voted for just 2 years ago. Professor Douglas Bergman with the Drug Enforcement and Policy Center at Ohio State joins me now. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so under the current tax rates, the projected revenue from marijuana sales is at $60 million from the excise tax and $35 million from the state's sales tax. So under the current law, how are those funds supposed to be allocated at this point?
Yeah, the law that the voters passed had about a third, a little more than a third, going to something called the Social Equity and Jobs Fund, which was built with a lot of different purposes, including trying to undo some of the harms of the previous prohibition on cannabis. Then another third or so was to go to localities, it's called the Community Fund, to help them with the costs and elements that are around having marijuana stores in their localities. And then a quarter was to go to substance abuse and mental health issues, and then a 3%, just a small amount, was to help run the program.
Got it. So, Professor Berman, Senate Bill 56, which has already passed in the Senate, now it's in committee in the House, it would raise the tax rate to 25.75%. How does this bill change where those funds may go?
My understanding is the money's almost all going to go into the general fund. In other words, the specified allocations that the voters passed, those would all be wiped out. There's still a provision for localities for a limited number of years to get a smaller portion of the overall funds. But generally speaking, as I understand it, the expectation is now to just pour all the money that would come from the special marijuana tax revenue into the general fund.
Do you anticipate any pushback on this? I mean, this isn't what the voters voted for originally.
Yeah, there's been considerable pushback from a variety of sources. In particular, a lot of the localities have said, look, we allowed for there to be marijuana businesses in our community based on the expectation that we would get some of the tax revenues that would help improve roads, do other kind of infrastructure improvements. Localities had pretty much unlimited authority to use that money as they see fit. Now that that money is not going to be made directly available to them, there's a lot of concern. We did a survey at the center that showed universally all local politicians and actors, government officials were very disappointed that this change is being considered. Likewise, a number of advocates who pushed for issue 2 to be passed built their arguments around there being additional funding for substance abuse issues and for this jobs and social equity purposes. They're also complaining, but it seems like the General Assembly isn't too moved by those complaints because there have been very few proposals that imagine keeping the funding the way it's been allocated under the initiative.
And you've researched how 23 other states have legalized marijuana, how they have spent their tax revenue, and I'm wondering how those compare to Ohio's plan. Do you have any examples of how Ohio maybe should look at using its revenue streams based on what you've seen?
Absolutely. Well, I really think that issue 2, as the voters enacted it, was very much in keeping with what we see in a number of other states, with specific allocations going to a variety of purposes, especially substance abuse concerns, so that we feel like we're addressing that problem, not just for cannabis use that can still happen after legalization, but for a range of other drugs that's always a problem in the community. A number of states have also allocated to education funds or other special use purposes, college savings programs, things of those nature. We've seen across the board. Think of something good to use the money for. We see that specified in just about every state, although there's an extraordinary amount of variation. What will make Ohio unique is if the proposals in the recent legislation move forward. There's virtually no state that just dumps all the money into the general fund. Some money goes into the general fund in most states, but Ohio would be unique in allocating all of this money to go back into the general fund rather than having these specified uses for the tax revenue. Partially that's because a lot of states have passed the laws specifically with that tax revenue in mind and having specific purposes in mind that they thought that money could be used for well for the general public interest.
Got it. Okay, so Ohio would be on its own in that regard. Now, a lot of people are wondering if this would de-incentivize the growth of the industry. We will see what lawmakers decide. Professor Berman, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at 5.
Thank you for your questions. Appreciate your work.